Okay, Mike, welcome to the Dadical podcast. Excited to have you today. And just by way of a little introduction for the audience here, Mike is our first guest on the Dadical podcast on our inaugural episode, and really excited to have you, Mike. And one of the reasons for that is Mike's my uncle, and so I know Mike pretty well. And I've had the opportunity to observe him as a father, and also seen the incredible kids that he's raised, and because of that, I've been really excited to chat with him about fatherhood and the lessons that he's learned. And so, Mike, welcome to the podcast. I'd love to have you. Before we dive in too deep, just give us a little bit of background about you, introduce us to your family, so that we can have some context going into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you for the time, and it's great to be with you, and great to be the first guest on this podcast. So, yeah, my name is Mike Lamb, live here in San Antonio, Texas, and married my wife, Sherrie, almost 2 years ago now, and we have been blessed with four wonderful children, two boys and two girls. So Tristan is our oldest, Mackenzie, Sierra, and Braden. And they are all now out of the house, and we are officially empty nesters here in San Antonio. But San Antonio has been a great place for us to enjoy raising our children. Sherrie and I met in Utah as I got moved out there after some mission service, and she was from San Antonio, and that's how we kind of ended up back here. And it's been a great place to raise our kiddos. We've loved it here and have enjoyed making our home base in Texas. I've worked for the last 26 years now in publishing, so I've basically done education sales and sales management. Middle management has been a great niche for me, and done that for the last 26 years. And now I am just a short period away from official retirement, just a couple weeks, as a matter of fact. So you catch me at a time when we'll be involved in a new transition into a different phase of life. But yeah, I've loved it here in San Antonio. Feel very blessed for the work I've been able to do, and great to have the chance to talk about my work as a father as well, which is paramount to anything else we've done.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, first of all, on retirement. That's pretty exciting. And it sounds like you've got a couple of new phases that you're going into right now. Obviously, retirement's one of them, but you just became an empty nester. So tell me about that. How does that feel as you enter this new phase of fatherhood?
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I feel like maybe I wasn't fully prepared, and we can talk a little bit more about that as we go. But we had the type of home where we hosted a lot of events. We had kids over at our house all the time, and our kids have all been fairly social, and so it was common for us to have big get-togethers and gatherings at the house over time. And so when you go from that and a lot of background noise to nobody living in the upstairs of my house, it's strange, and there is a weird quiet that you have to get used to. And so, we've found ourselves just turning the TV on at times to keep ourselves company and have some background noise to fill that void. But at the flip side of that is we've been able to just enjoy some freedom and some quiet, and rekindle a relationship as husband and wife that you sometimes have a hard time doing when you are so focused on getting your kids raised and get them, where you feel like they're at a good place to take on life and the next steps in their journey.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I know this is the topic is fatherhood, but I think a huge important component of fatherhood is your relationship with your spouse. And it seems like as your kids leave the house, you probably learn a lot about your relationship with your spouse, or at the same time maybe recognize the importance of maintaining that relationship with your spouse. And so maybe just a quick question I'd love to get your thoughts on is, how have you made sure to prioritize that relationship among the chaos of fatherhood?
That's a great question, and one that I think is a balance that every man has to try to find. And I would say there are times where I feel like, man, I really could have done a better job at that. But what I have found is that it is raising children is a premier focus, right, for us as fathers, and to try to balance that. It is a challenge to make sure that you maintain the foundation of what got you there, what made those kids a part of the journey in the first place. And what I would say is that over the last couple of years, where we've become, kind of official empty nesters, we realized the importance of rekindling and maybe coming up with new ways to connect as husband and wife. And so, while there might have been better opportunity to better focus on that along the way, what we have done well is we've come up with new things that we enjoy together. So my wife and I, over the last few years, we've started playing pickleball, for instance, and that has been a great new thing. We've, because of that, become friends with other, couples, and so it's been a good thing socially. It's been a good thing just for us, health-wise. We've started going to concerts, which we never did really as we were younger, but we found some passion and shared interest in some country music artists that we love and enjoy, and have made concerts a part of our activity that we do together. And so there's just been new things that we have discovered that we love doing together, and it's exciting. It's actually really neat to try to rekindle that and to see how you can come together over time. And it's been a invigoration, I guess, of our love for each other, which is a really neat thing to experience.
Nice. Okay, last concert you went to, just for fun.
Dylan Scott, maybe a lesser known country music artist, but he played in Helota's at Floor's Country Store, just about 20 minutes from us, and he put on a really good concert. So if you haven't heard his music, he's really good. Nice.
I haven't, so I'll have to check it out. But all right, maybe let's zoom out a little bit, because on this podcast, what our intent is to talk to everyday fathers just like you, or just like whoever might be listening, because we've all had experiences and challenges and wins and losses and things like that everybody can learn from. And so I want to zoom out and kind of dive into your experience as a whole, and we'll listen to your experiences and learn from them. But I wanted to start out and find out a little bit. I think everybody's fatherhood journey, it starts with the influences that they have in their lives. And so I'd love to understand maybe who do you consider to be the most impactful father figure in your life, and tell me a little bit about why.
Sure. I think for me, it's a little bit divided. So if I can, split the difference here a little bit, I would say there are two individuals that were most impactful, and the first being my biological father, and then the second would be my father-in-law. And so I almost feel like I've had kind of two distinct experiences with key father figures in my life, and I will say that when it comes to my biological father, I learned both good and bad things, but you can take the bad and turn them into a good experience and a way to direct your own path, right? And so there are certain things that I learned that I cherish from my biological father, like some things that I just do naturally, like when I was young, my dad would always make sure, like if we went fishing, which was a passion of his, and we would go fishing together, and he would just always make sure like that I had the very best fishing pole, that I had the best lures, that I was given the best opportunity to catch a fish. And I didn't even realize that was a thing I had learned from him until later in life, when I just naturally did that. And I was thankful to realize and reflect back that that was something he had done and that I experienced and just embodied later as a father. So that was a really good thing. On the flip side, I would say my biological father, he had some challenges in his own path, and there were things that he did that did not prioritize family that were deeply impactful and hard for our family. And so I wanted to change my own path in a way that, maybe didn't impact my own family that way. And so, one of the lighter things, I guess I would say, is when he would come home from a day at work, my dad would typically just go lay on the couch, and he'd ask for a glass of ice water, which one of the kids would go get and provide for him, and he would lay on the couch and enjoy, getting, I guess, relaxed from the day. Well, my mom's job wasn't done. She obviously still had things to do, and I didn't love that. I wanted to be different than that, and so my home has looked far different than that. We, have made sure that teamwork is a 24/7 job, because her job doesn't stop, and my job shouldn't stop just because I got home from work. So I've made it an effort to try to be an equal partner in the chores and in the daily activities around the house. And so I guess that would highlight a good and bad way my own father impacted me, but how I've tried to channel it for good. Secondly, my father-in-law, Gary Payne, and he's been gone for several years now, but Gary was a wonderful man. And, I can almost get choked up talking about him, because he just embodied wisdom and goodness. And he impacted me in a lot of ways. So, first of all, service. He was wonderful about giving service, and he would say, "I'd rather dig a ditch than give a presentation or a talk anytime." And that's really who he was. He was happy to go help and grab a shovel and dig in and help, literally and figuratively. He also taught me a lot about just being a man and about being a father. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and so there were some key moments in life where I just did not have that father figure around. And so maybe there were some things that I could have been able to be taught that I missed, that Gary was able to help me dig in on and learn on the back end. He taught me a lot about finances, which my dad did not know. I mean, and you can't teach what you don't know, right? And so my dad, always kind of lived in a paycheck to paycheck environment. And Gary, my father-in-law, is we were married young. I was 23 and Sherrie was 22. And he asked me very early on, "Hey, do you want to be wealthy?" I said, "Sure." I mean, who wouldn't want to be wealthy? We all want to be wealthy. And he said, "Well, then, do you have the discipline to be wealthy?" I said, "Well, I think so." It's like, "Okay, I'll tell you how to do it. It's not a secret, but you got to have the discipline to do it. It's not about how much you make. It's about what you do with what you make." And he said, let's talk about retirement. I'm like, I'm 23 years old, and you want to talk to me about retirement? He said, "Yeah, I do." And so that's when I started to learn about what 401ks are and what IRAs are, and about what compounding interest ends up being over time, and things that I had no earthly clue about as a young man, but he did. And he was able to lay out a path that has certainly blessed us, and have seen some of his wisdom come to fruition over time, and that I've been deeply grateful for.
So, Mike, what's interesting to me about that is it sounds like, first of all, like you're a father-in-law, right? And I imagine that, I have a 15-year-old daughter who turned 16 in November, and the idea of, navigating father-in-lawhood sounds terrifying to me, but because you want to love the kid, and at the same time is this guy good enough for my daughter? There's a lot of competing thoughts there, I'm sure. And I imagine Gary was dealing with many of the same thoughts, but at the same time, it seems like he recognized that you needed to, like that he had an opportunity to teach you, and that you would benefit from that. And I guess I would love to hear a little bit more about how you feel like he navigated those challenges with welcoming a new person into the family that is brand new and grew up differently and things like that. Maybe you don't fully trust them yet, but at the same time taking that opportunity to mentorship because or provide mentorship because that's huge.
It is, yeah. It's funny you mentioned being a father-in-law and how challenging or different that experience is, and it is. I mean, the truth is, I have had to remind myself who I was when Gary so willingly accepted me into the family, because I literally had nothing. I had a little bit of college experience. I had no idea what I wanted to do or be professionally long term. No real clear career path. What I did have was the willingness to work hard. So I had drive and I was coachable. I was willing to be coached. And I think he recognized that and always appreciated that, which made our relationship meaningful and easier over time. And so I think remembering that has been helpful for me as a reminder when maybe I'm thinking to myself how nobody's good enough for my own daughter, especially. I mean, it's easy to think that way as a dad. But remembering who I was and that mentorship and how much it meant to me has been a big part of accepting and trying to embody as much of that as I can into my own experience.
Was there any friction as a new son-in-law that you can remember?
I wouldn't say friction. It was just understanding that everybody is a product of their own environment, right? That we are all a product of our upbringing and the environment. And so, my son-in-law's experience of his upbringing is far different than my daughter's, right? And so, understanding how those can mesh together and how I, as a father-in-law, need to give the distance and respect necessary to let them understand and determine their own path, but also try to mentor as much as that door is open for mentorship. That's a delicate balance that you have to strike, and one that I'm still learning because I still have other in-laws that will be added to the mix over time. I've got 2 children that are yet to marry. One's engaged, one not yet, but I'm still learning that part of the equation, and frankly, it's a work in progress.
Well, I think the cool thing about your story is, obviously your dad had a massive impact on you, but I think we think a lot about our responsibility or the opportunity for mentorship that we have as fathers. We don't necessarily think about the opportunity that we'll have or even the responsibility that we'll have to provide the same to the spouses of our children and things like that. And that's a really interesting concept because it seems like Gary recognized that opportunity and look at the impact that he had on you and potentially on your family and everything else. That's not necessarily even something that crossed my mind as I even started having these discussions.
Yeah, I think that I will forever be grateful for the way that I feel like I was blessed with a father on the second half of my own experience in life. And so Gary never intended to be a replacement father, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
But he was always willing to do whatever I needed to help me and coach me along the way. And so recognizing his wisdom and experience in life and how rich that was, he was a regular go-to for me because I just appreciated so much that almost any problem we came to him with, he had a good answer for. And if he didn't, he knew where to go for it and would be very willing to coach us in that direction. And so, I think that experience gives me a lot of motivation to try to do as much of that as I can with my own in-laws.
Okay, you have those experiences with both your father and your father-in-law, and now it's time for you to become a dad. What's your plan? Like what did you take from those experiences to kind of shape who you felt like you would be as a father?
Yeah, I wanted, you have an idea of what fatherhood is going to be. And then then there's the reality of okay, um, I have to make sure that I'm sharing the responsibility well with my spouse, who, we determined early on that we wanted to try to have Sherrie home with the kids. And I know that's not the experience everybody gets to have. We were committed early on. There were two things that we actually talked about early on in our marriage. We wanted two goals to come to fruition. Number one, we wanted Sherrie to be able to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom, because we both were fortunate to have that environment for the most part in our own childhood, and we knew how impactful that could be. Secondly, I wanted to retire at 55 years old. So we wanted to help each other reach those goals. And so that was kind of an early foundation that we agreed upon. And then, then I had to take on my career path, and then, be able to try to mesh being a father and, make sure I recognized and maintained that as my priority, while also balancing who I knew I needed to be professionally in order to meet that goal of retirement at 55. That was a unique challenge, and I think it is for every man. And sometimes we can get so enmeshed in our career path that it becomes more definitive of who we are, and trying to fight that off and make sure that the balance was maintained as a father myself has been a challenge that I didn't always get right, but feel thankful, for the most part, on how that experience was in my own journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that goal to have your wife stay home, the kids, and you're right. Like, not everybody does have that opportunity. In fact, my wife worked nights for 10 years in the emergency room to help us get things up off the ground, and that meant sacrificing some time away from the family and things like that. But what impact do you feel like it had to be able to keep Sherrie at home with the kids?
Yeah, I think that they were just blessed with a constant. There was a constant. There was a constant reinforcement of activity, responsibility. I will say that my kids are supremely self-reliant at this point in life, and that's a blessing and sometimes a challenge all at the same time. But they are blessed, I think, with that because of the environment that primarily their mom created. We had a culture of work in our home. And so one of the things I'm most proud of, frankly, of my kids is none of them are scared of work, because it has been an example for them from day one. So there was an attempt to focus in on reading and making sure they were taking care of their homework, that they were involved in extracurricular activities, that there wasn't a focus in on technology and things that can maybe divert from what we felt was the most important growth in their lives. And so these are things that Sherrie reinforced that I wouldn't have been able to do because of my involvement at work and not having that time with them, that I am very thankful for.
So obviously, teaching them hard work was an important part of what you guys decided was going to be priorities for you with your kids. What about, like, what specifically did you have in mind that, hey, these are the things that I want to teach my kids as a father?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, faith has been at the center of how we built our relationship and how we wanted our kids to grow up. And so we decided early on that we wanted, to make sure that they had a home that was based on spirituality. And so the belief that foundation would serve them throughout all their challenges and problems in life was a primary motivator for us. And so we did things that would reinforce that foundation as much as possible. And so we've gone to church as a family since they were all young. And so culturally, it just became a part of who we were as a family to go to church. It wasn't just that, though. It was also prayers of thanks, of gratitude before each meal and at night as a family. And there was something supremely powerful and bonding to do that together. There was scripture study and talk about, gospel stories that were also a part of our culture at home. And so doing these things, I think, helped to just lay a foundation that, we felt could serve them well throughout their own experience and challenges in life. It was a focus and something that we feel like, for the most part, we were blessed to do.
Maybe just a quick follow up is, how often do you guys pray together, or did you pray together when they were in the home?
It was at least 3 times a day for morning, breakfast, a lot of time, prayer, for our meals, and then dinner prayers, and then evening family get together before we all go to bed prayer. So at least 3 times a day, sometimes more, and more times than not, we would have that scripture study at night where there was just a short lesson about spirituality or gospel learning that was shared together, and then our nighttime prayer.
It's interesting because as your kids get older, it gets harder and harder and harder to have everybody together, to have prayer together or meals together and things like that. And one thing that Jill and I found, Jill's my wife, one thing that we found as parents is we noticed a period of time where it felt like there was a lot of contention in our home. Our kids weren't getting along very well. They were saying mean things about each other and things like that. And so one thing that we implemented that actually has been a huge blessing for our family is when we get together for our family prayers in the evening, whoever's turn it is to say the prayer, everybody in the family goes around and says one thing that they love about that person before they say the prayer. And then that person has to say one thing that they love about themselves. And it's interesting because you would think it's just a dumb, cheesy thing, it's just a small thing. And yet we definitely recognize the difference in our home of the way our kids talk to each other and treat each other and things like that, of when we were doing that and when we weren't. There came a point actually where we stopped. We kind of felt like maybe we had grown out of it a little bit, and immediately I felt like more contention was introduced back into the home. The kids were fighting and not being, loving to each other or kind to each other or whatever. And so we actually instituted it back. And it's funny because my kids are, they're not as old as your kids now, but I've got a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an almost 19-year-old. And we still do that to this day. And it's been such a huge blessing for our family. And I think that's one thing that you have to consider as a parent is not only, all right, what am I going to teach them and things like that, but also what is our home going to feel like? Because these kids go to school, they go to work, and they're hanging out with other kids who may have the same values as your family, may not. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that the home has to be some sort of a refuge for them from, it has to feel different than other places that they go. And it has to be a place where they feel is safe and comfortable and things like that. And so I guess maybe if you could share a little bit more about how you guys were intentional about creating the right environment in your home.
Sure. Thank you. I love that question. For us, it was, do some of those basic spiritual foundational things. And included in that was the commitment to have what we call a family home evening, which is basically a night per week, mostly Monday nights, that we just kind of set aside as a dedicated family night to do something that was just family and spiritually oriented, right? And so sometimes it would be an activity that we would all go out and do. Other times there was a specific lesson, and a lot of times I would try to build an object lesson of some kind to that, because that seemed to to hit home with them, especially as they were younger. And so I love your example of sharing those good things about each other that you love before prayer, because those to me are the kinds of impactful things that they will carry with them forever. And so there were some moments like that in bringing up our own kids that I know are distinctly impactful because they have said so. So for instance, in one of those family evening lessons, we talked about rock or Play-Doh, and I had a rock and a piece of Play-Doh. And we talked about how our hearts can be molded and if they are malleable, can be shaped by our Savior. And if we stay coachable and willing to take advice and be the type of person that will change as needed, then we are more like the Play-Doh. But if we are hard-hearted and we let pride get in the way, then we're more like the rock. And so it was funny that simple lesson, for some reason, stuck more heavily than some of the others that I taught. And there was a common theme, when things kind of got a little bit challenging, or maybe there was some contention, rock or Play-Doh, if that was mentioned, we knew exactly what it meant, and that maybe we needed to take a look about how we were handling the situation. And that, was something that was a common theme. There was another one that was, I had a number of words that were written out on strips and printed out, and we had a little trash can and a little treasure box. And the word we would read, and the question was this a trash word or a treasure word? And so they would, quickly understand if it was a good word or a bad word. It wasn't anything overtly bad, but it was bad enough that they knew. And so they would put the bad ones in the trash, and they'd put the good ones in the treasure. But it was also one of these things that they would know long term. They would talk about trash or treasure, trash or treasure. It was like they would remind each other because they remembered that lesson. And so these were things that I was thankful that, first of all, we committed as a family to do. And secondly, I never, as a father, wanted Sherrie to feel like she had to carry the load spiritually. And so the fact that, I was happy to take on the family evenings like that and try to be at the forefront of the lesson, I know she supremely appreciated and has mentioned throughout time. And so those were some things that stand out to me as ways that we were committed to create that culture like you were talking about.
I love that it seems like some of the things that you don't plan necessarily, or just things that you do somehow become like weird traditions in your family, right? Like the trash or treasure thing, or we've got a bunch of. In fact, my kids have had so many nicknames evolve over the years because of the dumb dumb nicknames that we give each other and stuff like that. And it's just funny how those things stick. But it kind of makes me think of how important it is that we are deliberate about creating some of these things. And you don't know what's going to stick. But if you're not deliberately creating positive lessons, teaching, things like that, then the question is what sticks, right? Is it not treating each other with love and respect? Is it being kind of awful to each other and things like that? Like if you're not really deliberate about the good things, then the bad is kind of what becomes the norm or the tradition or the things that your kids carry on, and not because of them, but because of what we allowed. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think that if we are not intentional or deliberate as parents, then the world is so full of distraction, right? And especially now, I'm lucky enough to where I raised my kids in a time when the digital distraction was just becoming a big thing, right? And while it was definitely there, it wasn't to the extent that I believe it is now or will continue to be over time. And so, yeah, there are so many ways that I think the influences and impact of the world can be felt and the idea was really worrisome to us that they would in some ways define themselves by what they might see or feedback they might get on social media. And, that I think is a huge challenge and obstacle for parents today. And so trying to be able to balance that versus what and who they are, and making sure they understand that, I think is a primary responsibility for us as parents. And if we are not deliberate about it, then that can go off the rails pretty quick.
Well, Mike, I'm not sure there's a bigger challenge. I mean, I'm sure maybe there is, but that's a huge challenge for any parent right now, is dealing with, okay, I want to be able to get a hold of my kid, and things like that. And so, like, having a phone these days seems to make sense for most kids, but at the same time, how do I manage that in a way that doesn't allow it to consume their attention, consume their thoughts, suck away any productivity they have. And not to mention, different things that they can get into from having access to everything on their phones. And so I guess my question would be, how did you guys manage that as parents?
Yeah, great question. And one that I believe is maybe, like you say, the biggest challenge that parents have to deal with. So I am not going to sit here and pretend to tell you that we got it all right. There are some things that we worked on and agreed to early on that were rules of the home.
Like
and
what?
so when when our kiddos came home, they knew that, first of all, we didn't allow any electronic device in their bedrooms. So they had them in common areas. So they didn't even take them upstairs.
Just to have you elaborate here, I'll play dumb. Why?
It was more so to make sure their time was spent productively, I think. But there was also obviously the concern that anything that's done in secret or private can potentially go off the rails and be something lead them down a path that we were worried they might go on. And as a young person, sometimes they don't even know where those paths are and how they can take them down a negative path or direction. And so trying to help them understand that is an opportunity and a challenge, but something that we just felt like, okay, we want to try to make sure that that their digital time is in a common area was important to us. We tried to put an equal amount of reading into the equation that they might have on digital devices, because we believe in the skill of reading, and that needed to be something that we tried to reinforce as parents.
What does that mean? Does that mean they had to read to earn screen time, or a certain portion of their screen time was reading? What do you mean by that?
In our environment, they had to read in order to earn a certain amount of screen time. And okay. I think that equation maybe shifted over time a little bit on what it meant, but it was more so meant to highlight the importance of reading and making sure they were broadening their minds in positive ways.
Yeah. And not just dulling their minds on social
That's
media,
right? That's right. That's right.
I love that. Okay, so no dad bats 1,000. Can you, as you look back at your time as a father, is there an experience that sticks out to you where you're like, man, I wish I could have that one back?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that there are a lot of things I would go back and change. No, you're right. I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. And I think that there are moments that I recognize that I just could have been more patient. And so I think that if I could go back, I would say, hey, don't sweat the small stuff quite as much. Be the type of dad that doesn't overreact if things are shared, because you want to be the kind of dad that your kiddos are comfortable going to with whatever problem or issue. And the more you foster an environment of patience and understanding, the more likely they will be to continue to share.
Why?
And so, well, because they they don't want to feel judged or admonished, or that every problem would be met with frustration. And so that is something I feel like I did okay on, but I could have done better on.
Okay. Okay. So, and it sounds like what you're saying is if they feel like every single like anytime they screw up or maybe have a challenge or whatever, and they bring that to you, if you overreact, then at some point the decision's going to be it's not worth bringing up to dad because he's just going to get pissed. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Totally. Yeah, you totally nailed it there. And so, maybe being better at understanding the gravity of what they might be sharing in the moment, and then, allowing myself to take a deep breath and ease into my response would have been a smarter approach.
Yeah. It makes me think of the other day we were playing frisbee golf as a family, and my daughter has this bad habit of she'll throw the frisbee and it'll be a bad one, and so she immediately grabs another frisbee and throws it. And she threw hers and it was a bad one, and so it was my turn to go, and I was walking in front of where she was, and next thing I know I just get cracked by a disc in the back of the head because I didn't know she was throwing another one. And it's so hard. Like I probably could have reacted a little bit better. I caught myself pretty quickly, but my immediate reaction was, "What are you doing?" And it's so hard. It takes discipline, kind of like Gary was teaching you with finances. Like it takes discipline to take a deep breath and be like, "All right, it's okay." Like there's bigger things at play here than just how I react in this moment. So I got to be careful, but I love what you're saying about your kids being willing to making an environment that's safe so that your kids feel comfortable talking to you. It's funny. Our 19-year-old son, almost 19-year-old son Jackson, he's when he gets home from hanging out and we're still up, he'll come in and chat with us and talk to us about the night or that sort of thing. And he's pretty good about sharing with us what's on his mind and things like that. And that's always something that I've that's really important to me, is that my kids feel comfortable doing that. And it sounds like you've experienced something similar, but I don't think, sometimes I wonder if parents realize how important it is that your kids feel comfortable talking to you about whatever's on their mind, because look, they're going to screw up. They're going to make huge mistakes sometimes. And if all it takes is one time to fly off the handle, and they will shut down communication with you, and that's the worst thing that can happen because they need you. Like they need to be able to communicate with you. So I love that was a priority for you. Let's rewind to you as a brand new dad. You've got all this experience. All your kids are now grown. What would you go back and tell yourself as a new dad? What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that what I would probably say is it's okay to put the computer down quicker. I worked a job that required a lot of time, and it wasn't over 9 to 5. I mean, I had a lot of follow up that needed to be done to create the successful career path that I wanted. It required time after hours, and so that was the time when my kids were home, and when there would be moments to go ahead and toss the ball, or play a game, or just listen, like we're talking about, and talking with them. And I would be even better, or I would be even quicker to put the computer down and relish those moments and just savor the moment, because there's never an email important enough as that moment might be to savor and enjoy with your kids. And as we're talking about communication with them and how that looks, I mean, every kid is different. Some kids are very communicative and quick to share with you what's going on with their day. Others, you just get very select snippets of time, and if you're not intentional with that moment, you might miss out, like you're talking about, moving forward. And so just being a little bit more intentional at those times and moments, I would probably counsel myself to take advantage of and savor, because those are the moments that you're going to relish long term.
Yeah. It's you always hear that it goes by too fast, but I imagine in your stage right now, you're probably feeling it more than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I get, occasional reminders on social media myself about things we were doing 10 years ago. And if you look at the amount of life experience that has happened in those 10 years, it's easy to be shocked at how much has changed in a short 5 to 7 to 10 year period. And so, yeah, I mean, I've got kiddos that are now grown and creating families of their own, and now I'm on to grandkids in my life, and things that you just do not think about. I mean, I still feel like in my mind I'm a young man, even though my body's not there, like I'd want it to be. But yeah, I am amazed at how fast life can go. So I remember being that young person where these older people were saying, hey, hold on to it and enjoy it because it goes by so fast, and kind of laughing them off a little bit. But now I'm that guy telling that to the younger people because it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. That does pose an interesting situation that you're in now, where when we talk about fatherhood, a lot of times we picture the time with kids in the home and things like that. But it's very clear that fatherhood does not end, or your responsibilities or challenges as a father don't end when your kids move out of the home. Now you're parenting adults. Talk to me about that. How does this line up with what you anticipated as your kids got older?
That may be the best question that you have asked, and they've all been good. But I will say that because it has been the most challenging, and the part of fatherhood I believe I was least prepared for. So I don't know exactly why, but you think, for me, I thought about fatherhood definitely about, in the time that they were in the home. I mean, that is what was most prominent in my mind as I thought about fatherhood, and the most impactful. And I believe that it is the most impactful in just kind of laying that foundation. But it is far from the end. And I guess I never believed that it was the end, but maybe I didn't comprehend how much fathering would still need to happen and how challenging that would be, because the windows to impact become smaller, and the need to rely on the foundation you set and the independence and self-reliance that you want them to have needs to kick in. And so it's a unique challenge of letting them experience life, even if that means they swing and miss, just like we did when we were younger, and just letting that happen and waiting for those windows of opportunity to influence, and letting them come to you and be able to be patient in that process has been a unique experience and challenge, one that I'm still working on.
Yeah, because if you push too hard or try to get too involved and things like that, I mean, they're adults and they consider themselves adults, and so there's a world where if you push too hard, you push them away, right? And at the same time, they definitely need your influence, and they've never done this before. They're in a crucial period of their life, and so how do you find the balance there?
So I think that is also very very much determined by each kid and their coachability. So each child has a different willingness to take advice or ask for advice. And so, trying to not interject opinion too frequently unless it's asked for is a big part of that. And so, there are times where you just feel that it's time to interject opinion because you feel like there's maybe a danger in the path that they're choosing. And so that you have to rely on your intuition, and for us, motivation by how we feel prompted by the Spirit to interject that opinion, and at what time to do so. But mostly it's, you need to wait for them to ask for it. And the opportunity for patience is there constantly, because sometimes you wish they asked a little bit more. But if you're not waiting for them to ask for it, then you have the potential to just be a nag, and for that distance to become more part of the equation that you're trying so hard to avoid.
It makes me think too, kind of along with what you're saying. At the end of the day, when a kid lives under your roof, or when they're not an adult, it's a lot easier to have a certain level of influence, and even a certain level of control, right? Like, hey, you may want to go somewhere, but you're not using the car because you lost privileges, or whatever the case may be. Like, you can have that type of influence as a father, and then they become adults, they move out of the house, whatever, and you can't make decisions for them anymore. You can't even, you have no control at that point, and you shouldn't. But it kind of, like you said, you have to let them fail at times and things like that. But I guess maybe my question is as we look at this stage where they're young adults and they're making their own decisions, and hoping that they make the right ones, I guess, how does that change the way you look back at the time that you had them in the home, and the foundations that you're laying and things like that? Because all who they are now, largely, at least to some degree, everybody's their own person. You could do everything right as a parent, and kids could still, go whatever way they're going to go. So if that's the case, then how do you view the importance of the time that they have in the home, considering that largely shapes what happens, or has a huge influence on who they become once they're outside of the home?
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful to think, back to the foundation that you were trying to lay, and to try to see if you can continue that moving forward. So I'll give you an example. When my oldest, Tristan, was a young boy, we were heading out to the ranch house to go fishing. Well, on the way out, we decided to grab a treat. And as we stopped to grab a treat, Tristan chose black licorice as his treat. Well, I can't stand black licorice.
Oh, it's an excellent choice.
I think it's gross. I mean, it's very, very much debated, right? But I think it's gross. But you know what? That's me. And I realized, hey, I need to be careful about telling him that that's gross, because he might love black licorice. And so I let him choose black licorice, and I just chose a couple of treats. And we went and paid, and got in the car and headed further towards the ranch. He opened up his black licorice, and sure enough, he thought it was disgusting. And so, and we had the opportunity then to share other treats. But the lesson there, I wanted to be careful about interjecting too much of my own opinion, because I needed to let him become who he is. And he might have loved black licorice, and that was who he was, and I would need to embrace and support and encourage that. And so I guess that's just a small example of what I try now to maintain as they are adults. First of all, understand the gravity of the decision. In that moment, what kind of candy he chose was insignificant to who he was going to be as a man, right? And so recognizing that is important. But as they get older, those decisions become more impactful. And so I think there's a balance of understanding the gravity of each decision, and how much that means we need to interject opinion along the way to try to help and mold who they are, and to let them have that freedom also along the way to become who they are.
It reminds me of a video that I saw of a man walking with a really small son, and they're walking down this path, and there's like a rope across the path. And the dad goes and steps right over the rope, and the son gets up to the rope and kind of like it's a really young kid, like a toddler, and he's kind of like trying to figure out how to get around the rope, and he starts crying. He's telling his dad to come back and help him, and his dad's just like, come on. And his dad even at one point like goes about 20 feet ahead and just sits down and waits. And he's not coming to move the rope for the kid. He's not removing it altogether. He's not lifting the kid up over. And eventually the kid ends up figuring it out. He climbs over it, and as soon as he gets over the rope, the dad stands up and claps and is excited for him and gives him a hug. And I think it's such a good reminder for us that as parents, like, our job is not to remove obstacles from our kids. Like, in fact, if that's all we do, we are hindering our kids. And I feel like from a resilience standpoint, like, our kids are facing challenges that we never even faced and may never face, you know what I mean? And if we remove all of the obstacles, all of the friction for them as they grow up, then how are they going to get around the obstacles that they face when they're older? And so I think I don't know if it was Good and Plenty, but the black licorice story is a great example of that. Like, yeah, he's got to find out that it's gross on his own, even though it's not. Black licorice is delicious, but I love that concept of not removing obstacles. That's not our job. And I think our default, because we love our kids, is we want to. Like, we want to go, like, we want them to be happy, and so we want to make that easy for them. And sometimes the hardest thing, allowing them to go through the hardest thing, is the best thing that we can do for them, because that's how they learn and that's how they prepare themselves. And so, love that. Okay, so 50 years from now, unfortunately, Mike, I know you're a healthy guy. I played basketball with you a little while back. Your body's not as old as you say it is, but Mike's long gone at that point. And let's say your kids are describing you as a father. What do you hope they say?
Oh man, that's a good question. And I think I would love for them to say they knew that their dad loved the gospel and loved their mother. I think that if I could let that be a legacy, then that would be enough for them to maybe try to emulate in some form or fashion in their own lives and in their own experience and own families. There was one point in my life where Sierra, my youngest daughter, she said to me and gave me maybe one of the biggest compliments I've ever had in my life, when she said, Dad, sorry, I'm going to get a little choked up on this one. She said, Dad, I want to marry a man who treats me the way you treat Mom. And that was one of the most wonderful things. I think she didn't realize it, but one of the most wonderful things she could have said to me. And so if they can remember things like that, I'll be happy and rest well.
Mike, why do you think it's so important that they remember how you treated their mom?
Because that is the most primary example of love that they'll have in real time in their lives. There's nothing more that they'll see on a consistent basis than how you love your spouse. And so if they can see love through the way we treated each other, then I think that there's no bigger impact we can have on them.
Yeah. Especially when you consider your daughters in that specific instance. I think what you're doing in the way that you treat your wife, the relationship that you have with your wife, is largely what your daughter will seek. You're modeling what she expects out of a marriage as well. And so I think it becomes critically important how we treat their mother. And it's kind of funny. My oldest mentioned to my brother one time that he knows that I take Mom's side sometimes, even when I may not agree with mom and I might be more on his side, I take her side anyway. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. Because that's my job. Like we're united, and we're going to be united because that's the most important relationship in my life. And the kids benefit from that being the most important relationship in our lives. And so I love that. Okay, Mike, last thing, is there anything else that you feel like, if you're talking to young fathers who are listening to this podcast, anything else you feel like they need to have in mind, or anything else you would love to leave with them?
Sure. I guess I would reiterate some of the points that I made earlier. First of all, if we can, as men, stay humble and stay coachable, I think that it will open us up for all sorts of opportunity, both for service and our career. I think that we need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable at times as well, better than maybe we are. I think that being committed to hard work will also be a key foundational principle that will impact your family and your kiddos for good. And I think sharing the load with your spouse equally and recognizing that her job is 24/7 and yours should as well. And so if you can adequately share that, you'll gain a deep respect from her, but also a recognition from your kiddos that that's the environment they should embody and foster long term in their homes. And I think those things have paid dividends, and I hope will continue to pay dividends in my kids' lives. So I think those things are all really smart to do. I think there's also an aspect of being disciplined financially that I feel supremely grateful for, and that took sacrifice along the way. But if you can dedicate yourself to doing it, I can absolutely promise it's not rocket science to be well off and to be financially at peace. There's actually a pretty clear path to doing it, but you just have to be disciplined. And it can be on a salary of $50,000 a year or $250,000 a year. You can be successful financially if you're disciplined. And so all of those things I think are important and are things that have contributed to the blessings and opportunities that we find ourselves with today.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much, Seth, for the time. I appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode of Dadical. Thanks so much for listening. If this conversation resonated with you, please hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. I'm going to drop new episodes every Wednesday, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And if you know a dad with a story worth telling, I would love to talk to them. So please get them in touch with me. Get me in touch with them. You can reach out to dadicalpodcast.com. Or if you're interested in being a guest yourself, I'd love to chat with you. Until next time, don't sleepwalk through fatherhood. Let's be Dadical.